But we see that unfortunately, the ringleaders of the Kiev regime are in no hurry today to solve this conflict peacefully. If the authorities in Kiev do not want to solve the issue in a peaceful way, we will reach all of the goals set in the course of the special military operation by military means.
It is amid this backdrop that Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskiy has gone to negotiate with his American counterpart, Donald Trump. He has already floated a number of measures, such as demilitarized zones in contested areas. But he has not agreed to surrender territory yet. The question is, will Putin or Trump accept that? Bureau Report, WION. World is One.
Before we talk to Dr. Glenn Deason, let me just give you a picture of what is happening at the Mar-a-Lago beach. And any moment from now, both President Trump and Zelenskiy will appear from those doors at the Mar-a-Lago Beach Resort in Florida, in Miami. Zelenskiy is in the United States to meet with Trump, and just before the meeting between the two leaders, President Trump had spoken to Russian President Volodymyr Putin. Let's now talk to Dr. Glenn Deason. He is a professor of international relations at the University of Southeastern Norway. He is now joining us live from Oslo. Dr. Deason, good to see you, and thank you very much for your time. Time and again, this has happened. When Trump meets Zelensky, he conducts a phone call with Russian President Vladimir Putin. He says that this phone call was productive. What does that say about this meeting? Do you read anything from that?
Well, it depends. Trump has a tendency to go back and forth. So the problem is that whatever Zelensky is negotiating with Trump, it seems to contradict entirely what Trump is seemingly already agreed with Putin, that is already from Alaska. That is that any peace deal has to be based on addressing the root causes. So that would have to be to restore Ukraine's neutrality and also to accept the territorial concessions as a result of these 4 years of war. Mm-hmm. Now, the problem is that so far it appears that Zelensky has set some red lines, that he doesn't accept permanent neutrality. He has suggested they won't join NATO for now, but it won't be written into the constitution. Also, there's still talks about having 800,000 peacetime troops, which can't be done without Western financing and training, which means that the West would then be in Ukraine or connected to Ukraine, which is also contradicts the principle of neutrality. Mm-hmm. And of course, he doesn't want to discuss territorial concessions. So there's not much expectations behind this, which is why in the clip you showed before, President Putin also makes the argument that there's not much more incentive for them to ask for Ukrainian troops to withdraw from Donetsk. Mm-hmm. Now, this pretty much signals that we will win this anyway. So our demands will likely increase much more in the near future. So, but it could also be a warning: strike a deal now, or again, any future deal will be much, much worse.
Dr. Deason, let me ask you this: Zelenskyy's third visit to the United States this year to meet Donald Trump. There are some people who say they're 50-50. They are hopeful that the results of this meeting will be successful, will be, good. But there are others who say, nah, it will be the same thing. What do you think?
Again, it's hard to say. I think Trump wants to act as this mediator, but of course this is very much America's war as well, all the way since back to 2014. But it does appear that the United States want to put an end to this war, not out of some altruism, but simply because the war is being lost. So the main objective of the U.S. is to stop wasting its resources on a lost war and focus its limited resources and priorities other places. So mainly Asia and the Western Hemisphere. So they would like to pivot a bit away from Europe, and the Ukraine war is preventing them from doing so. However, if they can hand over the war to the Europeans, then the Americans would probably be okay with that. But again, I don't think anyone believes that the Europeans are able to fill the shoes of the Americans and keep the war going. But as for the aspirations in Kiev and Europe, I think the main goal is simply to win over Trump to their side, to put his pressure on Russia, because pressure on Russia would mean sanctions on Russia, more weapons to Ukraine. So the objective is to keep the war going, and so it's, from this perspective, it's quite important that Trump falls on the side of Zelensky this time and go after the Russians. I have my doubts, however, especially after this phone call with Putin. It appears that the signal from Moscow has been quite clear that they won't go through another round of this back and forth, and I assume, or I expect Trump now to put more pressure on Ukraine. However, I have been wrong before about Trump, so I could be wrong again.
Well, there's some critics who are measuring this talks, whether they will be successful or whether they will fail again. Then there are those who talk about the 20-point peace plan that Zelensky discussed with Europe, and also President Trump, his 21-point peace plan for Ukraine and Russia, which Russia has denied over time and has said that they're not willing to discuss any of those measures until their demands are met. So what exactly will Trump do today that is different?
It remains to be seen. I think the only card he can really play now is to act more coercively and put more pressure, because again, it seems that all the different sides have put down their red lines and they're not willing to move much. So there won't be any peace through where they're standing at this moment, and neither side wants to move. So I do think that he will probably put an immense amount of pressure. But again, the main conflict now between the Europeans and the Russians are, who will he put pressure on? Will he put pressure on the Europeans and Zelensky, or will he put the pressure on the Russians? So I think likely that the pressure will probably come on Zelensky, simply because of pragmatism, that Trump doesn't really have any other cards to play with the Russians, and given that the front line seems to be unraveling very quickly now, it simply makes more sense to put most of the pressure on the losing side, given that the losing side can't really dictate the terms. But again, it all depends on the motivations by the United States as well. And whatever Trump the desires he has to end the war, he also has, of course, a big political class in Washington, which on most of these issues tend to lean towards the Europeans, would like to see this war prolonged and continue fighting the Russians.
All right, I think the best thing to do right now, Dr. Glenn Deason, is I'll just let you go for a moment until we see both Presidents Zelensky and Trump emerge from the doors at the Mar-a-Lago beach resort any moment from now. Then I will come back to you.
Yeah.
All right, so while we are waiting for both Presidents Zelensky and Trump to emerge from this Mar-a-Lago beach resort door, the meeting was supposed to, or the press conference was supposed to start 10 minutes ago, but it has now been delayed by another 15 minutes. So we'll just wait for both leaders to emerge from these doors, and everyone is waiting with bated breath as to what both leaders are going to say about the peace agreement in Ukraine and Russia. And we also saw President Trump saying that he had a phone call with President Putin for 1 hour and 15 minutes. And he says, according to him, that the call was productive and they discussed various issues that he is going to raise with the Ukrainian leader. who are asking, why is this meeting taking place at Mar-a-Lago? For most of the US and global public, the site of official events inside Trump's Mar-a-Lago estate in Florida may seem unusual. We mostly see these sorts of, foreign visits inside the Oval. Traditionally, however, US presidents spend much of the end of the year at holiday destinations. Joe Biden, for example, was in the US Virgin Islands at around this time last year. Trump, for his part, has been in Florida since the 19th of December. He arrived in West Palm Beach that night following a rally in North Carolina. And like I mentioned, President Trump did indicate that he had a phone call with the Russian President Volodymyr Putin just before this meeting between Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskiy and himself. And the call lasted 1 hour, 15 minutes. And according to Russian media, the phone conversation between their president and US President Trump was held at the invitation and initiative of the US side and took place ahead of Trump's planned in-person meeting with Zelenskiy. Now, according to the Russian presidential aide, Yuri Ushakov, it lasted 1 hour, 15 minutes, like I said. And the key takeaways from the call was initiated by the US president. Trump wanted to discuss a number of issues ahead of his meeting with Zelenskiy. The tone was described as friendly, constructive, and businesslike. Trump strongly pushed the idea of ending the conflict as soon as possible. Trump said he was convinced Russia is seeking a political and diplomatic settlement. Ukraine should promptly make a decision on Donbass, taking into account the situation on the front lines, and this is a demand from Russia. Putin and Trump agreed that a temporary ceasefire under the pretext of a referendum would only prolong the conflict, and a final end to hostilities requires a political decision by the Kiev regime regarding Donbass. Trump also raised the prospects for US economic cooperation with Russia and Ukraine. Putin agreed to continue settlement efforts through two specially created working groups. The two leaders exchanged Christmas and New Year greetings. All right, Dr. Glenn Deason, thank you very much for staying with us. We are still waiting for both Presidents Trump and Zelensky to emerge from those closed doors at Mar-a-Lago. But this conversation between Trump and Putin, the key points from Ushakov's statements: the Russian president agreed with Trump's proposal to continue work on a settlement within the framework of specially created working groups. The parameters of the working groups on Ukraine will be announced in early January. The American leader stated the need to end the war as quickly as possible, and then he raised the issue of Donbass, saying that he will raise the issue with Ukraine, and Ukraine has to cede Donbass as soon as possible for peace to prevail. What do you make of it?
Well, the Donbass is very, very, very difficult for the Russians to negotiate on. So I think so far where the Russians are flexible, I think, is to create new administrative line for what is Zaporizhzhia and Kherson. In other words, they might be willing to freeze where the front is now and then let this be the new borders. Again, they haven't confirmed this, but this is a possibility. Donbass, however, given that this was the scene of the conflict for 11 years now, they won't negotiate anything there. So they already have Lugansk. The other part of Donbass is Donetsk. They're missing three major cities, which is Kramatorsk, Slovyansk, and Konstantinivka. Now, these are good fortification lines for the Ukrainians. So if you think that the Russians will just stop temporarily and then move on, then of course there would be apprehensions in Kiev to give up this territory, because then they would lose the best defensive line, and then they wouldn't really have much anymore thereafter until the Russians would reach the Dnieper River. So the concerns from the Ukrainian side are quite reasonable in terms of doubting that the Russians are sincere. But from the Russian perspective, this is this is simply non-negotiable, and this is why the territorial issue has now been a massive problem. If we would have gone back to beginning of 2022, when the Russians and the Ukrainians were negotiating in Istanbul, none of this would have been a problem. None of these territories would have been claimed. So it would have been much easier. But again, this is what 4 years of war has done. And also part of the reasons why the Russians demand Donbass is because they fear on the other side that the Europeans and the future American administration will encourage the Ukrainians again to challenge Russia. So for this reason, they want to hold these same strategic territories, which are good for defense. And I think all of this reflects the wider problem of this war, because this really goes back 30 years of post-Cold War history of creating a Europe without Russia. And this is what the Russians have been saying since the 90s. That is, you can't simply expand NATO up to our borders, and they always made it clear that Ukraine was their ultimate red line. So this is kind of the consequence now of 30 years of ignoring Russian security concerns, and now, of course, Russia has said they will just take care of their security through military force, it's a real impasse, and both sides are willing to escalate to a great extent, which we've already seen, which makes this so very much more dangerous. But of course, the whole problem here is a solution, because when the Russians say we want to address the root causes, this is what they're saying. This is what they're talking about. 30 years of what they see as flawed policies or aggressive policies by NATO. It's
Dr.
very difficult
Dissen?
to reverse this.
Dr. Dissen, sorry to cut you short, but there's something that I read that caught my eye, and it's a different kind of wording that has been put between the call between Trump and Putin. A responsible decision from Kiev is required for the final cessation of hostilities. This was never there before. I think there's a different kind of wording that has been put in place, don't you think?
Sorry, I missed the first part of that phrase.
A responsible decision from Kiev is required for the final cessation of hostilities. A responsible decision from Kiev is required for the final cessation of hostilities.
Yeah, that would be for Kiev to essentially accept the Russian terms, I think. But again, this is why the whole talks now between Trump and Zelenskiy are so strange, because all the things that Zelensky and the Europeans demand completely contradict what the Russians demand. So, for example, the Europeans say that they will continue no matter what to support Ukraine to uphold its sovereignty and territorial integrity. Well, when they say sovereignty, they mean Ukraine's right to join any military bloc they want. In other words, for European troops to be allowed to enter Ukraine. And when they talk about territorial integrity, of course, that means that they shouldn't be allowed to cede any territories. So none of this, it directly contradicts what essentially the Americans and the Russians have already agreed upon, more or less, are the root causes of the conflict. Something
also very interesting is that Trump spoke business. He said that he has impressive prospects for economic cooperation between the U.S. and Russia if the conflict in Ukraine ends. So that specifically means sanctions is out of the question.
Yeah, that would be one of the incentives that the U.S. can use to sway the Russians. I don't think the sanctions are the main thing the Russians are going for. They would like to have some reassurances on the security architecture of Europe, because whatever Trump promises today, that NATO won't expand anymore, all of this is what Russians have been asking for the past 30 years. However, Trump will be gone in 3 years' time, at least so we assume. And most likely, if the Democrats take power, they will reverse everything and probably go back to something looking more like Biden's foreign policy. So if this is the case, then all the agreements they're doing now isn't worth that much. That being said, they would like, of course, the sanctions to be removed, and very importantly, they want all their money back, because the EU has more or less permanently frozen these Russian assets. They've also taken quite a bit out of the proceeds. So they want a reversal on all of this, of course. But again, the main issue is, what do we do about the European security architecture?
Right.
Because the whole premise for the past 30 years is, how do you build European security? Well, that was to simply expand NATO and EU further and further east, and essentially cut off Russia from any representation or any seat at the table in Europe. So we ended up with this bizarre situation where every country in Europe should be a part of these main institutions, that is NATO and the EU, except for Russia, which happens to be the country with the largest population, the largest territory, the largest economy, and the largest military. And so what we call now European integration is actually a bit of a zero-sum project, where we ask neighboring countries, be it Georgia, Moldova, Ukraine, you have to choose between us or the Russians.
Right.
And a lot of this instigates internal conflicts, including now civil war, and also incentivizes foreign powers, that is both NATO and Russia, to intervene directly into this and essentially try to bet on their side. So we walked down a very dangerous path. Much of this was recognized by the Europeans already back in the 2000s, but nothing was ever done. So it's very difficult to see how we can address all of these issues now and have all of it resolved.
Exactly.
Because Trump seems to want a quick fix, but there is no quick fix to this.
Right. We are still okay. Now, the President of the United States, Donald Trump, has just emerged from the doors of Mar-a-Lago, Florida, and he's now with Zelenskiy, the President of Ukraine. We'll just hear for a bit what both leaders have to say.
President, do you think Putin is serious about peace this time?
I do. I think he is. I think they both are.
What was your message? I want to talk over. What was your message, Mr. Putin?
Got to make a deal. Got to get it done. Too many people dying, and I think both presidents want to make a deal. We believe that they're going to refuel.
Do you need Putin again soon?
Depends. I do believe that we have the makings of a deal. It's good for Ukraine, good for everybody. It's very important. There's nothing more important, my vote. We settled 8 wars, and this is the most difficult one. I thought it would be in the middle of the pack. This is the most difficult one, but we're going to get it done. We're going to have a great meeting today. This gentleman has worked very hard, and he's very brave, and his people are very brave. I mean, what they've gone through, no nation, very rarely has a nation ever had it go through this. So we're going to have a very good meeting today, I think, and I'm also calling President Putin back after the meeting, and we'll continue a negotiation. Pretty complex, but not that complex.
What should we expect a peace deal? Deadline?
I don't have deadlines. You know what my deadline is? Getting the war ended. We don't have deadlines. You agree with that?
Are you prepared to sign security agreement with Spain?
Well, it depends what the security agreement says. What a dumb question. Nobody even knows what the security agreement is going to say. But there will be a security agreement. It'll be a strong agreement. And the European nations are very much involved in that. They'll be very much involved in protection, etc. But the European nations have been really great. They're very much in line with this meeting and getting a deal done. They're terrific people. I think you can say that. There's nobody there. They all want to get it done, and they've been very supportive, I think.
Thank you so much, Mr. President. Thank you for this meeting. Thank you for your invitation. Yes, really, I agree with the President. Our teams, they do what they can. And I think that during the last months, they moved forward with negotiations and Americans. Thank you very much for your team, Steve and Charlie. And they worked very well. And they worked on different documents. And I hope that all these documents can bring peace as quick as possible. So, and I agree with the President that really European yes, and the President is in contact with them, and maybe we'll contact with them.
We can go
Today.
What made you want to come in person to be president today?
Sorry?
What made you want to come here to Mar-a-Lago to be president today?
What? Yeah. What?
Why?
So we spoke about our teams. They worked on 20 points plan. Then they worked on prosperity and security document. And 20 points plan is very important. We have to discuss and sequencing. Very important. Our teams talked about strategy, how to make step by step and to bring this closer, and we will discuss this strategy.
Mr. President, are you going to make territorial concessions?
We will speak about 20 points plan. There in 20 points plan, 90% by the way was done by our two teams. I think they made a great job, great work, and yes, we will discuss these points also.
And there are great economic benefits for Ukraine also, because there's a lot of rebuilding to do, and there's a lot of wealth to be had. And they have great wealth. Potentially they have great wealth. They want to get started. But there's a great economic benefit for Ukraine in what we're talking about.
President Trump, some are saying that the recent attacks in the past couple of days that Russia's staged against Ukraine shows that President Putin isn't serious about peace. What is your reaction to that?
No, he's very serious. I think, I can say that I believe Ukraine has made some very strong attacks also. And I don't say that negatively. I think you probably have to. I don't say that negatively. But I think, he hasn't told me that, but there have been some explosions in various parts of Russia, and it looks to me like, I don't know, I don't think it came from the Congo. I don't think it came from the United States of America. It possibly came from Ukraine, but I haven't asked that question. Maybe I won't bother asking. They're fighting a war, and we'll see what happens. But I believe it's a war that we have two willing parties, we have two willing countries. They want to see it end. Look, the people of Ukraine want it to end, and the people of Russia want it to end, and the two leaders want it to end.
Mr. President, some of the economic benefits for Ukraine, Europe is holding some billions in frozen Russian assets. Do you believe that should go to Ukraine to help rebuild, or go back to Russia?
None of that's been determined, but it'll go. It's going to go very quickly. I think we're in final stages of talking, and we're going to see. Otherwise, it's going to go on for a long time. It'll either end, or it's going to go on for a long time, and millions of additional people are going to be killed. Millions. And nobody wants that.
Are you still frustrated with this process?
What?
When you say that you think it will either end or will go on for a long time, and you say you don't have a deadline, so what are you expecting out of today's
I just think we can move very rapidly. I really feel that. We've spoken. I know you had dinner with Steve. Steve Witkoff and Jared have done a fantastic job. And everybody has. Marco's been incredible. The whole group has been, our group has been incredible. And Ukraine appreciates it, and Russia appreciates it. They both want to see it end, and we're going to get it ended. Thank you very much, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
We'll see you, I think, at the end, but I do think we'll call it Europe also. We're going to speak to the European leaders. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So there you have it. The meeting has now just begun between President Trump and Zelensky. We could barely hear both of them, but what Trump said is that he had a great meeting today. He also spoke with Putin. He did say that he will speak with Putin again after the meeting with Zelensky. He says he doesn't have a deadline. His deadline is to have the war end. And we also had Zelensky there speaking and saying that he has a 20-point peace plan, which he will present to President Trump, and they will be discussing on ways to end the hostilities. And when Trump asked Zelensky, is there a deadline? Zelensky also said there's no deadline. So both leaders are in tandem with their talks. So these talks have just begun. These much-awaited talks in Mar-a-Lago, Florida, have begun between Trump and Zelensky. Dr. Glenn Deason is still with us. He's a professor of international relations at the University of Southeastern Norway. He's in Oslo. Dr. Glenn, now the talks have kick-started. It was interesting for Trump to say that there is no deadline. His deadline is for the war to end.
Yes, well, he set deadlines before. He suggested he would end the war in 24 hours, then he made it 100 days, 6 months. So he's a bit cautious, I guess, about setting a deadline. Instead, there were some vague references to how he would like to stop the killing, and of course that this is his, I think, 8th war he's ended or resolved. So yeah, again, some flattery to himself. Yeah, of course, this is the beginning of the talk, so we don't really know. They don't want to expose that much yet and say things which can sow divisions. But what we really want to hear about is what are the security agreements. They mentioned that word, but this would entail some form of security guarantees. And the thing is, both the Ukrainians and the Russians want them, and they both should have some security guarantees to some extent. That is, that the Ukrainians have reasonable security concerns that perhaps Russia will attack in the future, while the Russians have legitimate security concerns that NATO will continue to build along its borders and will use Ukraine as a proxy. So how do you square this circle? It's quite a challenge, as any effort to deter Russia is essentially seen by Russia as an offensive step. So this is the difficult things they will have to discuss. To have the Europeans involved was mentioned. I think this is this could mean many things. It could mean that a future path to EU membership could be one of the rewards for Ukraine. On the other hand, if it entails European troops in Ukraine, then that contradicts the issue of neutrality. So that's a no-go for the Russians. So,
Dr. Glenn,
something that can be done.
Dr. Glenn, talking about flattery, there's something interesting that Trump did say. He said that these talks are complex, but not that complex. He says that we are going to have a deal. He also says that Zelensky has been a gentleman, a brave gentleman throughout the war. He also says that there will be great eco-benefits for Ukraine. What are you reading from what Trump is saying before the meeting?
Well, I think his approach to the whole thing is to look for economic
All right, we lost Dr. Glenn Deason. We'll try to get him back. But this is a meeting that was much anticipated. The world was waiting with bated breath as to what both leaders will discuss. And according to Trump, this is a complex situation for both Ukraine and Russia. And for him, he says this is the most difficult war that he's not been able to end. And he hopes that his discussion with both Putin and Zelensky will sort of end the war, because he says it's going to be very quickly. It's going to end very quickly. It's either going to end or go on for a long time. But my focus is to end the war very quickly. He says he will speak to President Putin again. Earlier, he had a phone call with President Putin that lasted for 1 hour and 15 minutes, and they laid out some of the prospects in his 21-point peace plan, where he says that Ukraine has to cede Donbass, and Trump said he will discuss the issue of Donbass with President Zelensky for peace to foster in Ukraine. Then Ukraine has to give up Donbass. That is one of the demands by Russia. And he says, the President of America says, that he has been told that there have been explosions. There's a lot of fighting in Ukraine, and the fighting has to end. So he hopes that with this meeting, and remember, this is the third visit of the Ukrainian president to the United States this year. Poland is planning to complete a new set of anti-drone fortifications along its eastern borders within the next 2 years. The development comes after Poland claimed that its airspace was breached by unmanned Russian aerial combat vehicles earlier this year. Deputy Defense Minister says they are expecting to have the first capabilities of the system in roughly 6 months or even sooner. The full system is likely to take 24 months to complete.
You could sit outside and have some food. Would you like to have food, or do you consider that a bribe? And therefore you cannot write honestly, or therefore you have to write a bad story. Okay, because if you'd like, would you like something to eat at this time? Yes or no? You can speak.
Yes, sir.
Yes? Okay.
Thank you, sir.
Margot,
Yes, sir.
take them outside, tell the chef, serve them a little lunch, okay?
Thank you, press.
Thank you, press. Thank you, press. Thank you, guys. Thank you, guys. Thank you, press. Thank you, press.
That should
Please leave the way
guarantee
you
good
came in.
stories,
Thank
but
you,
it
press.
won't.
Thank you, guys.
They'll only get worse. So go out of their way to make them worse. It's a hamburger. We have to make them again.
Alex, thanks. Press. Thank you, press. Thank you,
You
press.
lead the way. Go outside on the porch. Because we have the house closed today. Hey, Margot.
Behind you.
Thank you. Let's go. Let's go.
All right, so that is inside Mar-a-Lago Beach Resort, where President Trump is telling the press to take a lunch break because this is a closed-door meeting between the United States and Ukraine, and you can actually tell from his expression and his emotional gestures that he doesn't want the press inside that meeting at Mar-a-Lago Beach Resort. So it basically looks like both leaders or both delegation from Ukraine and the United States are having a lunch meeting, as you can see from that setup there. So President Trump is flanked by his Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, Secretary of War, Pete Hegseth. You can see Susie Wiles on the back foot. You can also see Jared Kushner, who's a son-in-law, and Steve Witkoff. Ukrainian delegation is led by the president of Ukraine. We also have the delegation from Ukraine's side, which is representing the Ukrainian president. And earlier, both leaders addressed the press at the doors of the Mar-a-Lago Beach Resort. And as you can see from your screen, President Trump is quite insistent that the press should not be in the room while they're discussing. So this is openly a closed-door meeting between Ukraine and the United States. All right, so just to bring you up to speed with what has happened in the last 30 or so minutes, President Trump has begun his meeting with President Zelensky at the Mar-a-Lago beach resort, and earlier, President Trump held a phone call between him and the Russian President Vladimir Putin, which lasted for about 1 hour and 15 minutes. And this is the readout from the Russian media. The phone conversation between the Russian leader and the U.S. President was held at the initiative of the U.S. side and took place ahead of Trump's planned in-person meeting with Zelensky, which has begun. Ushakov is the one who issued the statement. He says that the call was initiated by the U.S. President. Trump wanted to discuss a number of issues ahead of his meeting with Zelensky. The tone was described as friendly, constructive, and businesslike. Trump strongly pushed the idea of ending the conflict as soon as possible. Trump said he was convinced Russia seeks a political and diplomatic settlement. Ukraine should promptly make a decision on Donbass, taking into account the situation on the front lines. Putin and Trump agreed that a temporary ceasefire under the pretext of a referendum would only prolong the conflict. A final end to hostilities requires a political decision by the Kiev regime regarding Donbass. Trump also raised the prospects for U.S. economic cooperation with Russia and Ukraine. Putin agreed to continue settlement efforts through 2 specially created working groups. The 2 leaders exchanged Christmas and New Year greetings. The conversation also went on to say that the Russian president agreed with Trump's proposal to continue work on a settlement within a framework of specially created working groups. The parameters of the working groups on Ukraine will be announced in early January. The American leader stated that the need to end the war as quickly as possible is in tandem with his policies, and he also addressed the same when he was addressing the press outside the Mar-a-Lago beach resort with President Zelensky. Putin and Trump generally share similar views that a temporary truce would only prolong the conflict in Ukraine. Let's move away from that. The United States is edging towards a direct military confrontation with Venezuela. Sanctions, surveillance, and troop deployments continue to shape the Venezuela crisis and regional geopolitics across Latin America. In the past 3 months, the U.S. has ramped up its military presence near Venezuela with a range of advanced assets. This includes MQ-9 Reaper drones from Puerto Rico conducting surveillance, 10 CV-22 Osprey aircraft, a squadron of F-35B Lightning jets, 11 warships, including the USS Gerald Ford aircraft carrier. Washington has also deployed 5 destroyers, 3 amphibious assault ships, and P-8A Poseidon maritime patrol aircraft to monitor Venezuelan waters. The U.S. is also deploying F-22 Raptors and FA-18 Hornets to assert power and gather intelligence. Around 15,000 U.S. military personnel are now in the region, ready for potential action near Venezuela. The United States maintains multiple military assets across the Caribbean, Central America, and Florida. The U.S. Southern Command is based in Florida, and it oversees operations across Latin America and the Caribbean. Its focus includes counter-narcotics, intelligence gathering, and humanitarian missions. U.S. naval and air patrols regularly monitor Venezuela's coastline from the Caribbean and the Eastern Pacific. According to a recent report from the New York Times, Trump is pushing for a more aggressive stance against Venezuela. The report reveals that overlapping objectives drove the U.S. towards a militarized confrontation. They include weakening Venezuela's President Nicolas Maduro, combating drug cartels, and securing Venezuela's vast oil reserves. The Trump administration has ramped up military operations against Latin American drug cartels and intercepted Venezuelan oil tankers, leading to deadly clashes. Meanwhile, Venezuela's economy remains deeply affected by U.S. sanctions, often called a blockade by Caracas. Venezuela's oil industry has also been hit hard by American actions. Moreover, hyperinflation, shortages of food and medicine, and power cuts continue to affect daily life in the South American nation. Millions of Venezuelans have fled the country in search of stability. Maduro accuses the United States of economic warfare. He blames sanctions for Venezuela's economic collapse and denies responsibility for the humanitarian crises. Maduro also rejects U.S. support for opposition leaders, calling it foreign interference. The state of Kerala has recorded the highest diabetes-related mortality in India, highlighting growing concerns over lifestyle diseases in the state. Now, according to data released by the Office of the Registrar General of India on medical certifications of cause of death, in 2023, as many as 6,624 deaths in Kerala were attributed to diabetes mellitus. The state's diabetes mortality burden is part of a broader trend, with endocrine, nutritional and metabolic disorders accounting for 20.5% of all medically certified deaths in Kerala, which is the highest proportion for this disease category in India. However, Kerala's medical certification rate remains paradoxically low at 11.4%, with only less than 35,000 of the state's over 300,000 registered deaths being medically certified. This points to a continued reliance on non-institutional death reporting despite the state's strong healthcare infrastructure. Data further reveals that the state of Andhra Pradesh has recorded almost 42,000 deaths linked to circulatory system diseases. Within circulatory diseases, the state showed a heavy concentration in non-specific categories. Of the almost 42,000 circulatory deaths, pulmonary circulation and other forms of heart disease made up over 84% of circulatory fatalities. And finally, tourists flocked to Mount Etna over the holiday weekend, undeterred by renewed volcanic activity. As Europe's most active volcano continues to erupt, skiers climbed its snowy slopes even after Italy raised the alert level amid growing concerns. We leave you with this report. Thank you for watching.
From the bustling trading floors of Wall Street to the vibrant exchanges of Asian stock markets, WION breaks it down for you to make sense of what's happening, as we reveal the key factors behind events, strategic battles, and the game-changing business decisions that shape the world. We bring you all of this and more on World Business Watch. WION, India's global voice, the channel that brings you the biggest stories from across the world through India's lens. Now available in more than 190 countries worldwide, because we believe that the world is one. Watch us in Africa, Europe, USA and Canada, South America, Asia Pacific, Middle East and North African regions. Also available on these digital platforms across the world. WION, World is One.
Rashtriya Swayamsevak Sangh. To some, it's an extreme ideology. To others, it's the very soul of India. To some, it's rebellion. To others, it's a principle of nation building. Coming soon to challenge perceptions in RSS Centenary Year, Kesariya at 100.
Where darkness hides behind every corner. Where the truth is stranger than fiction. A show that dives deep into the stories which shock and mystify.
unsolved murders, psychopaths who defy explanation, international war crimes, and millions swindled in financial fraud. The victims, the accused, and the sinister plot. Crime is your front row seat to darkness.
From the bustling trading floors of Wall Street to the vibrant exchanges of Asian stock markets, WION breaks it down for you to make sense of what's happening, as we reveal the key factors behind events, strategic battles, and the game-changing business decisions that shape the world. We bring you all of this and more on World Business Watch. WION, India's global voice, the channel that brings you the biggest stories from across the world through India's lens. Now available in more than 190 countries worldwide. Because we believe that the world is one. Watch us in Africa, Europe, USA and Canada, South America, Asia Pacific, Middle East and North African regions. Also available on these digital platforms across the world. WION. World is one.
Rashtriya Swayamsevak Sangh. To some, it's an extreme ideology. To others, it's the very soul of India. To some, it's rebellion. To others, it's a principle of nation building. Coming soon to challenge perceptions in RSS centenary year, Kesariya at 100.
Where darkness hides behind every corner. Where the truth is stranger than fiction. A show that dives deep into the stories which shock and mystify. Unsolved murders. Psychopaths who defy explanation. International war crimes. And millions swindled in financial fraud. The victims, the accused, and the sinister plot. Crime is your front row seat to darkness.
Vielleicht nur als 5%.
From the bustling trading floors of Wall Street to the vibrant exchanges of Asian stock markets, WION breaks it down for you to make sense of what's happening, as we reveal the key factors behind events, strategic battles, and the game-changing business decisions that shape the world. We bring you all of this and more on World Business Watch. WION, India's global voice, the channel that brings you the biggest stories from across the world through India's lens. Now available in more than 190 countries worldwide. Because we believe that the world is one. Watch us in Africa, Europe, USA and Canada, South America, Asia Pacific, Middle East and North African regions. Also available on these digital platforms across the world. WION. World is one.
Welcome back and thank you for staying with us. Time now for WION Pulse, American Joker, the headlines. U.S. Southern Command increases build-up in what it calls war against the narco-terrorists. MQ-9 Reaper drones were spotted at Rafael Hernandez Airport in Puerto Rico amid simmering tensions with Venezuela. President Trump has congratulated the leaders of Thailand and Cambodia for agreeing to a ceasefire. Trump said that the U.S. was proud to help and wrote, "Perhaps the United States has become the real United Nations." At least 3 people have been killed amid protests in Syria's Latakia. Thousands had gathered to protest sectarian bloodshed which targeted Syria's Alawite Muslim minority community, but unknown assailants fired the crowd, leading to the fatalities. Hezbollah chief Naim Qassem says plans to fully disarm the group in Lebanon are an Israeli-American plan, accusing Israel of not abiding by the 2024 ceasefire agreement. In Bangladesh, the Jamaat-e-Islami says that the National Citizens Party has joined their electoral alliance. There has been dissent within the NCP, with several leaders leaving over the decision to work with the Jamaat. Kathmandu Metropolitan City Mayor Balendra Shah is nominated as a prime ministerial candidate as he and Rashtriya Swatantra Party ink a pact to jointly contest the March 5th Nepal elections. United Nations Migration Agency says violence in Western and Southern Sudan displaces more than 10,000 people within a 3-day period this week. The UK has imposed visa restrictions on the citizens of the Democratic Republic of Congo. Britain says this is over the DRC's poor cooperation when it comes to taking back illegal immigrants from the country. Mozambique have ended their 39-year wait for a first victory at the Africa Cup of Nations. Mozambique beat Gabon 3-2 in a Group F match to get their long-awaited AFCON win. Violence continues unabated in Bangladesh. Another youth leader has died after being shot by miscreants in Cox's Bazar. Muhammad Farooq was a leader of Bangladesh's Jubo Dal, the youth wing of the Bangladesh Nationalist Party. He was shot on December 9th and he succumbed to his injuries today. This comes amid the ongoing political chaos in the country over killing of prominent youth leader Sharif Osman Hadi, and a fresh controversy is brewing over Hadi's death. The Dhaka Metropolitan Police have claimed that Hadi's killers fled to India via the state of Meghalaya. However, Meghalaya police rejected these claims, calling them completely false. Just a few days ago, the Bangladeshi police said that it had no information about the whereabouts of Hadi's killers. They said there was no confirmation that the accused, Faisal Karim Masood and Alamgir Sheikh, had left Bangladesh. The latest assertion that the killers fled to India via Meghalaya has been swiftly countered. both by the Meghalaya police and also India's border security force. The BSF called the claims baseless and misleading, and the claims come at a time when Bangladesh's interim government is facing massive pressure from Hadi's organization, the Inkilab Moncho. Moncho is continuing with its protests and sit-in blockades to demand justice for their slain leader, Hadi. Today, the group called for blockades in all divisional cities. The Inkilab Moncho is calling for a speedy trial, as well as the involvement of international intelligence agencies like the FBI or Scotland Yard for an impartial investigation. Hadi was shot by assailants on December 12th and succumbed to his wounds on December 18th. Meanwhile, the National Citizens Party, or NCP, and the Liberal Democratic Party have joined an alliance led by the Jamaat-e-Islami. With this, the alliance has now emerged as a 10-party coalition. Two of NCP's key leaders have quit the party over the deal. Senior Joint Member Secretary Tasneem Jara announced her decision to run as an independent candidate from Dhaka 9 constituency. Joint Secretary Ashadul Haq has also quit the NCP over the tie-up. At least 30 central leaders have written to the party convener, Nahid Islam, warning that the alliance with the Jamaat will betray grassroots leaders and undermine the party's ideology. The NCP emerged as a political party with interim government chief Muhammad Yunus's blessings in February. It is an offshoot of the Students Against Discrimination group, which spearheaded last year's movement that toppled then Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina's Awami League government. Bangladesh's upcoming elections are going to welcome back a familiar face. Tariq Rahman, the acting chairman of the Bangladesh Nationalist Party, is back on the voter list. Bangladesh's Election Commission has agreed to include him as a voter for the Dhaka 17 constituency, and it doesn't end there. Reports say that BNP's first son will also be a candidate from this very constituency. Rahman just returned to Bangladesh after spending 17 years in self-imposed exile in the United Kingdom. He came back to meet his ailing mother, former Prime Minister Khaleda Zia. She has been hospitalized since November 23rd on account of numerous health issues. Rahman returned to a grand welcome, which hinted at his pivotal role in the upcoming elections. After checking on his mother and then participating in some BNP events, Rahman and his daughter Zeima went to the Electoral Training Institute on Saturday. Rahman arrived in a high-security motorcade. His wife Zubeida and their daughter Zeima had arrived before him. Once there, Rahman and his daughter put forth their applications to be included in the February voter list. Being a registered voter is mandatory to be allowed to contest elections in Bangladesh, and now the Election Commission has given both the green light. Although most of the focus remains on Tariq, his daughter has become a rising figure in Bangladesh's political landscape following their recent arrival from London. Zeima was first publicly seen in 2001, accompanying her grandmother, Khaleda Zia, during voting in that year's national election. She has mostly remained outside Bangladesh for the past 17 years, along with her exiled father, and has never held a formal position in the Bangladesh Nationalist Party. The 30-year-old Zeima Zarnaz Rahman earned her law degree at Queen Mary University in London. She has worked as a court advocate and legal assistant at several UK-based law firms. She has little experience in politics, but she is increasingly being seen as a young, fresh face for the BNP, a party that has been mired in allegations of corruption and scandals. Now, according to analysts, Zeima could play a major role as her father attempts to reinvent the BNP. After her return, she also put up a post on Facebook saying that she, quote, never forgot to tend to and cultivate her roots. Zeima added that she hoped to play the highest role that she could for Bangladesh by contributing to its rebuilding and by connecting directly with people on the ground. In the post, Zeima also shared memories of her grandmother, affectionately referring to her as Dadu. Khaleda Zia remains in extremely critical condition. She was hospitalized in Dhaka on November 23rd. Her physical condition has deteriorated significantly and she is currently in the ICU. Doctors have said that it is hard to say whether she will recover. She was last seen on that day in Dhaka when visiting Prime Minister of Bhutan met with her. However, her last public appearance was on November 21st at the Armed Forces Day event in Dhaka Cantonment, where she was spotted meeting with Bangladesh's chief advisor, Yunus. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskiy is in the United States. He's there to negotiate terms to finally end the war with Russia. He's meeting the mediator of the peace talks, President Trump. But as in all negotiations, there is going to have to be some give and take. What can Ukraine really hope to hold on to? What will it have to sacrifice or for the sake of peace? And what happens if Russia rejects Ukraine's offer? Here's a report.
Ukraine is still reeling from the latest Russian attack. Kyiv says that Moscow launched 500 drones and 40 missiles, including the Kinzhal, during its latest barrage. And the target was the Ukrainian capital itself. About 1 million households in Kyiv were left without power. Almost 40% of the residential buildings in Ukraine's capital don't have heating. So it's no wonder that Ukrainians don't have much hope.
I want for this to be over, but this is what our side wishes for. We don't have any leverage in this situation. Thus, I want that everyone stays healthy, strong, and patient now.
Here is the situation on the ground as of December 27th. Large swathes of Ukrainian territory are under Russian control. Moscow's forces have been making slow but steady gains, especially over the last few weeks. And they claim to have seized 2 more towns on Saturday itself.
Troops from the Central Group completed their route of the encircled Ukrainian Armed Forces Group and liberated the city of Dmitrov. The Eastern Group of Forces is advancing westward in the Zaporizhia region and also across the Dnipropetrovsk region, with the aim of establishing a security zone there. The city of Guliaipol has been liberated.
He used the Russian names for the Ukrainian towns of Mirnorad and Huliaipole. Mirnorad is in the Donetsk region. Huliaipole is in Zaporizhia. Moscow says it's making advances on both fronts. Russian President Vladimir Putin has demanded that Ukraine hand over the entire Donbas region. It is a key Russian goal in the war. Putin wants the Ukrainians to accept Russian terms so that the conflict can finally end. But he doesn't have much hope for a speedy resolution, which is why he also issued a warning.
But we see that unfortunately, the ringleaders of the Kiev regime are in no hurry today to solve this conflict peacefully. If the authorities in Kiev do not want to solve the issue in a peaceful way, we will reach all of the goals set in the course of the special military operation by military means.
It is amid this backdrop that Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskiy has gone to negotiate with his American counterpart, Donald Trump. He has already floated a number of measures, such as demilitarized zones in contested areas. But he has not agreed to surrender territory yet. The question is, will Putin or Trump accept that? Bureau Report, WION. World is one.
The United States is edging towards a direct military confrontation with Venezuela. Sanctions, surveillance, and troop deployments continue to shape the Venezuela crisis and regional geopolitics across Latin America. In the past 3 months, the U.S. has ramped up its military presence near Venezuela with a range of advanced assets. This includes MQ-9 Reaper drones from Puerto Rico conducting surveillance, 10 CV-22 Osprey aircraft, a squadron of F-35B Lightning jets, 11 warships including the USS Gerald Ford aircraft carrier. Washington has also deployed 5 destroyers, 3 amphibious assault ships, and P-8A Poseidon maritime patrol aircraft to monitor Venezuelan waters. The US is also deploying F-22 Raptors and FA-18 Hornets to assert power and gather intelligence. Around 15,000 U.S. military personnel are now in the region, ready for potential action near Venezuela. The U.S. maintains multiple military assets across the Caribbean, Central America, and Florida. The U.S. Southern Command is based in Florida, and it oversees operations across Latin America and the Caribbean. Its focus includes counter-narcotics, intelligence gathering, and humanitarian missions. U.S. naval and air patrols regularly monitor Venezuela's coastline from the Caribbean and the Eastern Pacific. According to a recent report from the New York Times, Trump is pushing for a more aggressive stance against Venezuela. The report reveals that overlapping objectives drove the U.S. towards a militarized confrontation. They include weakening Venezuela's President Nicolas Maduro, combating drug cartels, and securing Venezuela's vast oil reserves. The Trump administration has ramped up military operations against Latin American drug cartels and intercepted Venezuelan oil tankers, leading to deadly clashes. Meanwhile, Venezuela's economy remains deeply affected by U.S. sanctions, often called a blockade by Caracas. Venezuela's oil industry has also been hit hard by American actions. Moreover, hyperinflation, shortages of food and medicine, and power cuts continue to affect daily life in the South American nation. Millions of Venezuelans have fled the country in search of stability. Maduro accuses the United States of economic warfare. He blames sanctions for Venezuela's economic collapse and denies responsibility for the humanitarian crises. Maduro also rejects U.S. support for opposition leaders, calling it foreign interference. Israel's recognition of Somaliland has invited widespread criticism from across the globe. European Union and African Union have slammed the move. At least 21 countries, most of them from Muslim nations, have condemned the Israeli decision in a joint statement. The United Nations Security Council will hold an emergency meeting on the issue on Monday. The Arab League held an emergency meeting of permanent representatives following a request by Somalia. In its remarks, the Arab League presented Israel's recognition of Somaliland not as a standalone diplomatic move, but as a direct affront to regional order, Arab national security, and the core principles of international law. Countries like Jordan, Egypt, Saudi Arabia, Turkey, Iran, and the Palestinian Authority have also denounced Israel's recognition of Somaliland. The Somali ambassador to the Arab League, Ali Orari, even alleged that the recognition was part of a broader Israeli plan aimed at displacing Palestinians. Orari added that Somalia would use its rotating presidency of the United Nations Security Council from January 2026 to thwart these plans and stand against blatant Israeli ambitions. Somalia's President Hassan Sheikh Mohamud says that Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's illegal aggression to declare the country's northern region independent was against international law. Somalian people have also voiced their concerns over the development, with many expressing shock at images circulating online showing Somaliland supporters carrying the Israeli flag.
I heard the news that Somaliland has received recognition from Israel, even though it has not obtained full recognition from the world. This is something regrettable, that today Somali people and Somali territory are seeking recognition from Jews.
Europe has rejected the Israeli recognition of the breakaway region of Somaliland. EU Foreign Affairs spokesperson Anwar El-Anouni said that the bloc reaffirms the importance of respect for territorial integrity of Somalia and encourages meaningful dialogue between Somaliland and the Somalian government. Somaliland has its own currency, passports, and army. But since its unilateral declaration of independence in 1991, it has grappled with decades of isolation, while the territory itself remains deeply impoverished. Experts suggest that Israel's decision to recognize Somaliland was driven by its strategic interests. Somaliland's location on the Gulf of Aden, or Aden, and its proximity to Houthi-controlled territory in Yemen makes it a vital hub for monitoring and countering Iranian-backed threats. Reports indicate that Israel is in talks to establish a military base in Somaliland, providing a direct platform for operations against threats in the Red Sea. Israel also seeks to strengthen its footprint in Africa and find reliable partners outside traditional Arab-aligned states. While officially denied by Israel, there have been speculation that Somaliland was once considered for the resettlement of Palestinians from Gaza. Meanwhile, Somalia's Al-Qaeda-linked terrorist group Al-Shabaab has vowed to fight any attempts by Israel to claim or use part of Somaliland following Israel's move on the breakaway territory. The group's spokesperson issued a statement that it would not accept the recognition and will fight against it. Pakistan has once again exposed its own lies on India's Operation Sindoor after months of denial and innumerable claims of victory. The country's Deputy Prime Minister and Foreign Minister Ishaq Dar has admitted to major damage by India's precision strikes during that operation. Speaking at an end-of-year press conference, Dar confirmed that Indian drones struck the Noor Khan Air Base, a major target in military confrontation between India and Pakistan after the Pahalgam terror attack. The base is the home of the Pakistan Air Force's Air Mobility Command. Dar went further and admitted that Indian strikes caused damage to military installation and also injured personnel stationed at the base. Dar also said that 80 Indian drones entered Pakistani airspace in the span of 36 hours. He claimed 79 of them were intercepted by Pakistan's air defense systems, but one drone managed to hit the high-profile military installation. Noor Khan was one of the 11 military locations targeted by India during the confrontation in May. This included 2 radar bases, 5 airfields and 4 air bases. In a detailed account given by India's Chief of Air Staff, 9 to 10 Pakistani fighter jets were destroyed and 5 high-tech fighters were downed in air-to-air combat. Meanwhile, 4 to 5 Pakistani F-16s were destroyed on the ground, and 1 long-range surveillance aircraft was also struck from over 300 kilometers away. Claims of victory and admissions of defeat are not new for Pakistan. In the aftermath of the Pahalgam attack, Pakistan's defense minister openly admitted to fostering and supporting terrorism for 3 decades as part of state policy. Let's now take a look at the top stories making headlines across India at this hour. Security forces in Jammu and Kashmir's Bandipora district destroyed a suspicious object found along a roadside. Police and security personnel immediately cordoned off that area and neutralized the object as a precaution. Authorities said the situation is now normal and under control. Meanwhile, ahead of the New Year rush, security has been intensified at the Sri Mata Vaishno Devi Shrine. Father of a Tripura student who died in Dehradun has alleged a brutal racial attack in his FIR complaint. The victim was a 24-year-old MBA student who succumbed to his injuries after battling for his life for 17 days. His father said the victim was attacked with knives and blunt objects while trying to defend his younger brother from racial slurs. The family has alleged that police initially refused to file an FIR, registering it only after pressure from student bodies and senior officials. Police say 5 accused have been apprehended, while 1 suspect has fled abroad. President Draupadi Murmu undertook sortie on board submarine INS Vagshir along with the Supreme Commander of Indian Armed Forces on the western seaboard. The president embarked from Karwar Naval Harbour and spent over 2 hours inside the submarine. She witnessed operational demonstrations and interacting with the crew. Chief of the Naval Staff Admiral Dinesh Tripathi accompanied her during the sortie. Murmu stated that India's submarines in the Navy remain combat ready against any threat and also under all circumstances. For the first time in India, an exhibition of authentic gold and silver zari silk saris is being held in Coimbatore, Tamil Nadu. The highlight of the exhibition is an AI-based virtual try-on facility that allows customers to see on a screen how a sari of their choice would look on them, as if they were wearing it. Organized by a private company, the 2-day exhibition is taking place at a star hotel on Avinashi Road, more than 100 premium silk saris are on display, featuring 108 unique designs woven with genuine gold and silver zari. And finally, on WION Pulse, tourists flocked to Mount Etna over the holiday weekend, undeterred by renewed volcanic activity as Europe's most active volcano continues to erupt. Skiers climbed its snowy slopes even after Italy raised the alert level amid growing concerns. Thank you for watching.
Rashtriya Swayamsevak Sangh. To some, it's an extreme ideology. To others, it's the very soul of India. To some, it's rebellion. To others, it's a principle of nation building. Coming soon to challenge perceptions in RSS centenary year, Kesariya at 100.
WION, India's global voice, the channel that brings you the biggest stories from across the world through India's lens. Now available in more than 190 countries worldwide. Because we believe that the world is one. Watch us in Africa, Europe, USA and Canada, South America, Asia Pacific, Middle East and North African regions. Also available on these digital platforms across the world. WION, world is one.
Where darkness hides behind every corner. Where the truth is stranger than fiction. A show that dives deep into the stories which shock and mystify. Unsolved murders. Psychopaths who defy explanation. International war crimes. And millions swindled in financial fraud. The victims, the accused, and the sinister plot. Prime Crime is your front row seat to darkness.
From the bustling trading floors of Wall Street to the vibrant exchanges of Asian stock markets, WION breaks it down for you to make sense of what's happening. As we reveal the key factors behind events, strategic battles, and the game-changing business decisions that shape the world. We bring you all of this and more on World Business Watch. WION, India's global voice, the channel that brings you the biggest stories from across the world through India's lens. Now available in more than 190 countries worldwide. Because we believe that the world is one. Watch us in Africa, Europe, USA and Canada, South America, Asia Pacific, Middle East and North African regions. Also available on these digital platforms across the world. WION, world is one.
Welcome back to WION The World is One. We're glad you're watching. Thank you for staying with us. I'm Eric Njoka. The headlines. President Trump says he had a, quote, good and productive telephone call with Russian President Vladimir Putin. The call took place just prior to his meeting with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskiy. Ukraine's staked oil and gas firm, Naftogaz, says that Russia struck a heating plant in the city of Kherson. The attack reportedly caused significant damage to the facility. Well, the stage is all set for the meeting between Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky and U.S. President Trump. Zelensky is meeting Trump at his Mar-a-Lago resort in Florida. And just before the meeting, Trump had a telephone call with Russian President Vladimir Putin. Trump said the call was very productive. The call lasted 1 hour, 15 minutes. Russia has urged Ukraine to take courageous decisions regarding Donbass to end the war. Both Putin and Trump have agreed that a ceasefire will only prolong the conflict. So it seems this will be an all-for-nothing negotiation. How will these talks proceed? Let's take a look at this report.
Ukraine is still reeling from the latest Russian attack. Kyiv says that Moscow launched 500 drones and 40 missiles, including the Kinzhal, during its latest barrage. And the target was the Ukrainian capital itself. About 1 million households in Kyiv were left without power. Almost 40% of the residential buildings in Ukraine's capital don't have heating. So it's no wonder that Ukrainians don't have much hope.
I want for this to be over, but this is what our side wishes for. We don't have any leverage in this situation. Thus, I want that everyone stays healthy, strong, and patient now.
Here is the situation on the ground as of December 27th. Large swathes of Ukrainian territory are under Russian control. Moscow's forces have been making slow but steady gains, especially over the last few weeks. And they claim to have seized 2 more towns on Saturday itself.
Troops from the central group completed their route of the encircled Ukrainian Armed Forces group and liberated the city of Dimitrov. The eastern group of forces is advancing westward in the Zaporizhia region and also across the Dnipropetrovsk region, with the aim of establishing a security zone there. The city of Guliaipol has been liberated.
He used the Russian names for the Ukrainian towns of Mirnorad and Huliaipole. Mirnorad is in the Donetsk region. Huliaipole is in Zaporizhia. Moscow says it's making advances on both fronts. Russian President Vladimir Putin has demanded that Ukraine hand over the entire Donbass region. It is a key Russian goal in the war. Putin wants the Ukrainians to accept Russian terms so that the conflict can finally end. But he doesn't have much hope for a speedy resolution, which is why he also issued a warning.
But we see that unfortunately, the ringleaders of the Kiev regime are in no hurry today to solve this conflict peacefully. If the authorities in Kiev do not want to solve the issue in a peaceful way, we will reach all of the goals set in the course of the special military operation by military means.
It is amid this backdrop that Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskiy has gone to negotiate with his American counterpart, Donald Trump. He has already floated a number of measures, such as demilitarized zones in contested areas. But he has not agreed to surrender territory yet. The question is, will Putin or Trump accept that? Bureau Report, WION. World is One.
Before we talk to Dr. Glenn Deason, let me just give you a picture of what is happening at the Mar-a-Lago beach. And any moment from now, both President Trump and Zelensky will appear from those doors at the Mar-a-Lago beach resort in Florida, in Miami. Zelensky is in the United States to meet with Trump, and just before the meeting between the two leaders, President Trump had spoken to Russian President Volodymyr Putin. Let's now talk to Dr. Glenn Diesen. He is a professor of international relations at the University of Southeastern Norway. He is now joining us live from Oslo. Dr. Diesen, good to see you, and thank you very much for your time. Time and again, this has happened. When Trump meets Zelensky, he conducts a phone call with Russian President Vladimir Putin. He says that this phone call was productive. What does that say about this meeting? Do you read anything from that?
Well, it depends. Trump has a tendency to go back and forth. So the problem is that whatever Zelensky is negotiating with Trump, it seems to contradict entirely what Trump is seemingly already agreed with Putin, that is already from Alaska. That is that any peace deal has to be based on addressing the root causes. So that would have to be to restore Ukraine's neutrality and also